You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello everybody, thanks for joining us back at Healing Voices Project. Today, my guest is Maddie O'Malley from Empower Health Group. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great having you.
Yeah.
Now you are the owner and the CEO of Empower Health Group.
I am.
Yep, and you've had a little path to get here. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your story.
Sure.
What brought you to where you are now, a little bit of your history, your experiences.
Okay.
And, certainly what people can learn from what you've gone through. And now, to your credit, after all that you've gone through, years since you were mid-teens, 14, 15 years old.
Started young.
Yeah.
Actually, nowadays, it's kind of late, which is concerning. But
That's
yeah. Yeah.
Well, you've had certainly a progression to become owner and CEO of Empower Health Group, which is at the point when we air this, will be freshly opened in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Walking tomorrow, and I'm excited.
That's great.
I'm excited to help people and, try to make a difference and an impact.
Well, you are already. And you have for years, because you also, from a few years ago, you are, because once you are, you always are a recovery coach.
Correct.
You're right. Recovery coach, and you've been involved with different recovery centers, operating partner at Perennial, among others.
Yeah.
So you've had some experience. You didn't just wake up and say, hey, I'm going to be the owner and CEO. You've had something that led you to where you are now at Empower.
It was a learning experience. I've pretty much worked in every space in the treatment industry. From a behavioral health technician to operations to housing to case management to business development to understanding policies and procedures, licenses, compliance, and I've worked at numerous different places, and it was kind of going to college, right, and understanding how this space actually works, and not only works, but what's conducive to the patients, right? What's conducive to somebody that struggles with substance use disorder or alcoholism, right? And I've been able to have a firsthand experience on what is more or less, therapeutic and an actual method and an evidence-based method to treat patients, and what isn't. And I've been able to take that over time and collect all the data on it, and God willingly implement it at Empower Health Group.
Yeah, well, you've lived it, and so certainly you can relate on virtually every level.
Correct.
Of this. And so let's go back where this all started, Matt. Again, as we said, you were 14 years old, and you had a traumatizing experience.
I did, yeah. But that was the launching pad behind, my progression, right? It happened.
What happened? What happened actually?
So when I was 14, so I grew up in a household where I had a mother that severely struggled with mental health, and she had her own type of substance use disorder as well. Growing up, my mom took a lot of 2-week vacations. One would assume she was probably hospitalized or getting treated. And before all that happened, my mom, God rest her soul, and, recovery is a beautiful process, because now today, through the work I've done internally on myself, it's amazing how I could feel closer to my mother than I was when she was here on earth, right? It's the spirituality component behind it. When I help somebody and I put one foot in front of the other and I do the right thing, there's a presence there, and a true purpose, and that brings me closer to her.
That helps to guide you too, doesn't it?
It's my motivation.
Yes.
It's why I'm passionate and sometimes aggressive when it comes to getting people into the correct levels of care, why I take it so seriously. I know from a firsthand experience what happens if it goes untreated, right? And then, the disease of addiction will take two for one, right? So it took my mother, and then, it took me shortly after for over a decade, But before that, right, like it was... Look, like I always, lived in a constant state of fear.
Not to interrupt you,
Sure.
but when your mother passed,
Yeah.
who stepped in to bring her? Did you have a dad?
My dad is the, hands down, in my eyes, one of the most incredible human beings in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But my father did what a father's supposed to do, right? And my dad went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and worked until 8 o'clock at night. I had, an amazing grandmother that would step in, and aunts and uncles that would step in, and they did their very best. But there was a spiritual void inside of me. There was something that had to get filled.
Yeah.
And their best wasn't, it wasn't that it wasn't good enough, but like the disease of addiction is obsessive and compulsive, and it was going untreated. So I had to do what I needed to do, regardless of what was in my household, as far as love. So I, by 15 years old, I started, on my own path of experimenting.
Alcohol and drugs, or
alcohol and drugs.
What did it start with? Yeah.
So I started, with alcohol and oxys and cocaine and Perk 30s, and it wasn't, long until, the Perk 30s and the oxys turned into heroin, and, my drug of choice was more, right? My drug of choice was anything that could numb reality, right? Numb the fact that my mother's not here, numb the fact that I missed her, and I was scared of life on life's terms, and I was scared of responsibilities, and I was so insecure. Anything that could help me block that out. So it was, if I could indulge it and feel it and get instant gratification from it.
And it progressed pretty quickly.
Oh my God, yeah. It was very quick.
Mm-hmm.
That, mind you, I started at 15, by, 17, I pretty much had a needle in my arm. So,
so you were in high school.
I was, yeah.
Did you complete high school?
I did not, no.
As a result of this,
it was, it ran my life. It was rampant, and it, tarnished, the opportunity to complete high school, or my relationships and my trust with my family, and sports. I was really into football and all that types of stuff. It tarnished that. It's a true tornado that
took everything away.
It would take everything away, and I was okay with it.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
So I have a sister. I haven't spoken to my sister in quite a long time.
She's older or younger?
She's older than me,
Mm-hmm.
and that is due to the results of my addiction. So I'm sure there will be a time and a place where a lot of that stuff can be mended, but it's a process still today, even in long-term recovery, right? It's one foot in front of the other, staying in the moment and the today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And keeping yourself on that path.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So, 17, you're shooting heroin, and like you said, it's just whatever can get you to numb that feelings, whatever it was. I don't think didn't sound like you had a preference. Whatever it was that got you there.
Correct.
Where was that heading? I mean, I know where it was heading, but how much worse did it get?
Jails, institutions, and death.
Okay.
8 overdoses, fatal.
8 overdoses.
Yeah, so towards the end of my addiction, an overdose was a common thing with me. My father, slept with his phone next to the pillow for quite a long time.
Did you live with him at the time?
So yeah, me and my fight, yeah, we lived together, but God only knows where I was going to end up that day. And so what happens is you go in and out of treatment, and you think you could consume the same amount of drugs that your tolerance is used to, and you go full force into it, right? And as my process started to unfold, it obviously got so bad that I attempted treatment over and over again. I've been through numerous treatment facilities, numerous jail bids, numerous different pathways to might.
And each of those times, whether it's the recovery or the attempts at recovery in the jail time, even the times you were in jail and out, that still didn't stop you from continuing to use?
Absolutely not. I remember, and I speak to, some of the people that I'm close with in recovery and sponsees and sponsor, and the obsessive nature behind a drug addict or an alcoholic is so strong. I remember getting incarcerated and going in, and the only thing I could think about, how long is it going to be until I could get out and use? Like, it was the only thing I could think about. It's that strong. It's that overwhelming. And I would think about that day in and day out until I was released. And the first thing I would do
This is the day I've been waiting for.
This is the day I've been waiting for. Yeah. And it would be literally, I would come up with some elaborate, because my dad always tried to do everything he could to set boundaries, put me in scenarios where it was difficult for me to do it, but I knew he was going to do that, so I'd scheme and plot, and my family would do the same thing, and I'd scheme and I'd plot, and the first thing I would do is figure out how to go see the guy and get what I needed, because I could not live with my emotions. I could not do it. It was that strong.
After one overdose, you didn't learn. It turned into 8. Mm-hmm. What happened after the 8th one? And you said it was fatal. Obviously, you're here, but it was near fatal. So you came extremely close to death, probably more than once.
Numerous times.
Yeah.
The way I used was extremely dangerous, because you got to keep in mind what I was running from, right? I was running from my mother, right? And I wanted to be with my mother. So I used in such a dangerous way, where it was the way my mind, my alcoholic and drug addict mind, justified it was, if the disease takes me, I'm going to be with her.
So and that's an okay outcome.
And that's an okay outcome. And if it doesn't take me, I'm not going to feel that
Either
she's
way,
not with me.
You're better off than you were. So in your mind, you're better off than
it was insane the way I
anguish.
Justified it, and it caused very extreme and progressive and dangerous obsessive and compulsive habits.
The last one, did that change things? It was the last one for a reason.
It did. It did. It did change things.
Yeah.
I remember. I got rushed to the hospital, and I was in Melrose Wakefield Hospital, and my father was with me.
But let me go back. When you overdosed that 8th time, where was it? Who found you? How did you end up in the hospital?
I overdosed in Woburn, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
The disease of addiction is a crazy thing. Me and the girl that we were dating at the time had an overdose protocol. And this is things that are discussed between drug addicts, right? It's, if one of us does overdose because we're going to overdose, right? Kick me out of the car, knock on me, and call 911. Vice versa.
And then go away.
And go.
Yeah.
And wait for me to call you and come pick me up so we could continue to use. That's the madness behind the disease, right? So I had, it was my turn that week. So I had overdosed in Woburn, Massachusetts, and I had been brought to Melrose Wakefield Hospital.
By who?
By paramedics.
Who found you on the street?
Correct.
Okay.
So I had been brought to Melrose Wakefield Hospital, and in Melrose Wakefield Hospital, they have an amazing staff there, and they have a unit there that is, a holding for people that have, drug problems and everything like that. My dad came there, and I don't know what it was, but it was. He was ready, to accept the fact that he was going to lose his wife and his son to the same thing. And he was in tears. And it was just how broken he was that I knew something had to give. But another thing happened in that point in time is that I was still high at the time. And I noticed that I could not.
Were you given Narcan?
I was.
You were, okay.
I was. It was that scenario and the fact that I was high and the drugs were stopping to do what I needed them to do. I was high and I felt all these emotions, and I felt the fact that my mother wasn't with me, and I felt all of these things that I was running from.
Sounds like you felt the pain your father was going through also.
I mean, yeah, it was profound. It was powerful, and it was sad. And then my dad, he was always, God bless that man. He was always trying to find a solution. And he had been working with a gentleman that got me a scholarship to a facility in Florida. And this guy came to the hospital, picked me up, drove me to the Cape, kept me hostage in the Cape until I could get on the plane.
He wasn't letting you out of his sight.
He wasn't. Mm-hmm. He wasn't.
Yeah.
And I went to Florida, and I went to treatment, and it was a place in Florida that I ended up actually working for after I graduated treatment. It was called Simple Path Recovery.
How long were you in the treatment for?
So that time I stayed for about 90 days. I did the full, I did detox. Well, I did detox, I did residential, and then I did a 90-day clinical stay.
Okay.
Which is, detox is a medical necessity, then residential is medical with a splash of clinical. Clinical is where it happened.
But I have to ask you, and again, you've been through this. This wasn't the first time you were in a treatment center.
No.
What changed this time? Was it that realization, that awareness that you had about your dad and things? What changed? What was different that time versus the previous times?
Everything was the same, but it wasn't, right? It was just so it's a process, right? The problem with the disease of addiction is that some people don't make it through the process, right? I had reached ground zero, and I just knew something else had to give. I had to, I knew, what changed is that my drugs were not doing their job anymore. So I knew I had to do something else to live with these emotions.
Your ground zero, you survived your ground zero. A lot of people don't.
Correct.
Their ground zero is death. And you miraculously came out of this because you were
right there.
Right there. So you went through this treatment in Florida.
Yes.
Came out, and your dad was up in Massachusetts still.
Yes.
And so you eventually said, "Hey, I'm coming home." How did that go?
So that's not how it went.
I'm done. So yeah.
I completed treatment, and then I told my dad I was coming home. And he said, "I don't think that's a good idea, son. I think you should stay down there for longer, and you know what happens when you come home." I'm like, all right, but I'm coming home. So I got home.
Is it because you felt determined and past that? You felt that confident, or you just didn't have anywhere else to go?
Well, to be completely honest, I had a reservation. Is what I had. So I went to treatment, and in treatment I learned a lot about my emotions and coping skills and everything like that. And it worked, right? It was the seed that was planted that allowed me to go, but I still had this one last reservation. So my mind started obsessing again. And I did what I do. I schemed and I plotted, and I came home, It was the middle of the winter, and I used one more time. And when I did that last use, it just wasn't the same. It was just like,
Why? What was
because my
lacking?
recovery
Yeah.
spoiled my get high. It was the information that I had acquired in treatment that provided guilt, remorse, empathy,
Things
and
that were
emotions.
missing before.
Correct. Right? So my recovery messed up my get high. And it really messed it up, because after that use, I never used again. After that one time, I never used again. And I went into a sober house in Lynn, Massachusetts, right? I went all over the place trying to get clean, right? I got clean in the sober house on Essex Street in Lynn, Mass. And I don't know if you've ever heard about Lynn, but it's not the most, it's riddled with drugs. It's, a crime city.
Your
but I got-
temptations were pretty vast there.
It was vast,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the recovery was so strong there, because there was a place called the No Matter What Club, and the guys at the house would go, so mind you, before I started going to meetings, what I learned in treatment messed up my get high, and then I kept on going to meetings, and it enhanced my recovery, and my recovery became stronger than my disease.
That's that pivotal point, right? When
Yes.
when that happens.
Correct.
And you obviously reach that, and that's, like you said earlier, it's a process to get there.
It's
It's not, oh, I'm going to treatment, I'll be back, everything's going to be fine.
mind you, treatment,
Yeah.
over and over again, and then all of a sudden, it takes one. The crazy thing is, it takes one person to. It was one person in particularly that said something to me that really registered, that changed
Often that's
my
the
life.
case, yeah. What was that?
So when I was down there, I don't know why this was the thing that resonated with me, but he said, "Look, kid," he goes, "what you're doing is the most selfish thing in the whole entire world, because when you leave here from the disease, you're going to leave everybody that has been beside you the whole entire time, and they're going to be in pain for the rest of their lives." And that registered, and then I was like, it's, it was just, I couldn't deal with thinking about my father living the rest of his life, with 2 of his family members checked off the list. It's just, I couldn't do it. And then, he said to me, he goes, and not to mention, you've been everywhere. He goes, "Can I explain something to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he goes, "If I throw a pig in a box with lipstick on and I mail it somewhere, what is it when it gets there?" And I go, "I don't know, a pig in a box?" He goes, "It's a pig in a box with lipstick." And he goes, "No matter where you go, you're going to take your insanity with you if you don't treat it." So I'm like, wow, okay, he's got a valid point. It's been very proven that
You can't disguise this or mask it, change it. Right. It is what it is. What it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started to be open to change, and all those things, those repetitive quotes and those groups and those things that I was so
You
resistant
ignored
to.
earlier, right?
I
Or
opened up,
dismissed, yeah.
and an open mind. Really, it's just these quotes that are rehearsed almost at meetings and stuff like that. Willingness, open-mindedness, honesty. Right, honesty was the antidote to my disease. Right, you hold the keys to your freedom the whole entire time. How long do you want to lie about what's going on inside of you?
That's a good quote. Honesty is the antidote to your disease.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
It is.
Yeah.
In the disease, and I've there was an old timer in the Lynn meetings, and he said, honesty is the antidote to your disease, and the disease dies in the light of exposure. When I share it on a group level, when I get honest about the things I don't want to get honest about, I open myself up for some real help.
Then other things started to change too. I mean, you became a recovery coach. I mean, not right away, but what led to you becoming a recovery coach?
So I have an amazing support network.
Mm-hmm.
When I came back and I got embedded inside the community in the North Shore, I had some really incredible people that gave me some really incredible guidance and loved me and, built me up. And I became very passionate about my feelings. I spoke with conviction. I was very, once I started, being honest at a group level and seeing that people still love me for me,
Mm-hmm.
not for the fake Maddie or the person that I would give you to protect the real Maddie. It was contagious, and I would do all kinds of advocacy work, and people started to hit me up and be like, "Hey, can you get me into detox? Hey, can you do this?" And I'd spend time doing it, and the mothers of the recovery community is really who moved me into doing that, because they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself.
And then you started, I would think, to say, hey, I have some value here. Hey, I can contribute. I can help other people.
Correct.
Once you started recognizing that, it must have changed,
Yeah, well,
given you the motivation, right?
there's not a better feeling. Like, I thought getting high was a good feeling until I experienced getting somebody into treatment,
Mm-hmm.
and then getting a message from them a couple months later, like, "Hey, thank you for doing that. Like, I'm doing okay."
And you feel like I really helped save someone's life, help repair a broken family, the things you've experienced that you've prevented or helped or in some way.
I like to say,
You know?
if I take the glory, my head will blow up and I'll, float out of this building. But I like to say I played a part.
You're right.
I played a part. And because people led me to the water, but I had to drink it, right? I had to put one foot in front of the other and do the work, right? So I could give people the blueprint. They have to run with it.
And I think from the other side of family members, people who don't understand it as much, they get impatient, don't understand that. Why did it take you 8 overdoses? Why did you have to go through multiple treatment centers? What's wrong with you, Maddie? How the hell can't you just get, there's an impatience and a misunderstanding among many people. Would you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
And that's because the disease is self-centered fear and stubbornness.
Mm-hmm.
You have to run out of every lie. You have to manipulate every system. You have to, hopefully, for me, I had to tell every lie. I had to manipulate every system. I had to run out of all options.
Mm-hmm.
That there was one way, death or recovery.
Yeah.
And that's when, and it doesn't have to be that way, but more times than not, that's the way that it is.
Right.
And that's why, people are like, what is going on? Because it takes some time. We could get creative,
People who don't understand often get frustrated. And I didn't. I'm understanding it more, but I haven't experienced it. Oh, they're with members of our family and friends, certainly. But unless you've lived it, there's a disconnect.
Yeah. It's it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand.
And now with your passion, with your energy, now, and we're gonna jump ahead a little bit, but now you are, as we said earlier, not only you remained in this field as a recovery coach and helping people, but you've opened up your own treatment center called Empower Health Group.
Yes.
And that is opening now in Northampton. You're the owner, the CEO.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier,
the janitor.
you've been involved with every aspect of this.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about Empower and what's happening there.
So we are we're going to be licensed as a substance use treatment center with the state of Massachusetts and BSAS, which will be primarily treating alcoholism and addiction with various different methods that have been proven to work, evidence-based clinical methods.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also going to be licensed downstairs through the Department of Mental Health.
Okay.
And being able to do mental health primary.
Yep. And as you had mentioned, I remember we were speaking earlier, Empower Health Group, the signs is Empower Health Group.
Yeah.
And that is deliberate in a way that it doesn't say this is an addiction center, this is substance abuse recovery, because you recognizing the stigma and the reticence of certain people to say, I'm going to walk in there. You just, it's a little bit less intimidating.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a safe place where people feel comfortable going,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no need to smack a sign out front saying, hey, this is where alcoholics and drug addicts and people with mental health come throughout the day.
It's where all they all hang out, and let's stay away, right? Right. And so your path obviously led you to owning, managing. Now you've got staff worked out, and you've hired some people, and so you've got a lot of work. Like you said, you've been involved at every level of this, even as the janitor. So every single aspect of this, you're diving into.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's incredible, and it's like I was telling you before, I have helped open up 5 different facilities.
Okay.
At all levels. So I've had a firsthand experience on what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And to be honest with the industry nowadays, what people are billing for insurance for, and what is actually clinically necessary to help people.
Okay. Yeah.
That's from a professional standpoint. And then also going into treatment so many times myself and having a firsthand experience on what worked and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and you certainly can relate. And I know a couple of people that are working with you now. One who's been on our show, Adam. Great guy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible.
Yeah, Adam's a great guy, and we'll have him back. So I congratulate you, Maddie. In fact, thank you very much, and I appreciate what you're doing. And this is fantastic. And so Empower Health Group is empowerhg.com.
EmpowerHG.com, correct.
EmpowerHG.com. So if you're listening, please visit EmpowerHG.com. And again, thank you, Matt, for coming on, telling your story.
Yeah.
We'll be visiting again, and we're going to talk more about Empower Health Group.
Sure.
Thanks again for coming, and
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody for listening. See you all soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you.